This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. The possibility has been raised that many Vietnamese refugees may never find homes in America, but may live out their lives in refugee camps here. The prediction was made by John Eisenhower, the chairman of President Ford's Advisory Committee on Refugees, in a talk with our Barry Seraph.
Members of the advisory committee were sworn in and then quickly got to a discussion of how to promote refugee resettlement. Chairman John Eisenhower indicated later, however, that because of security or illiteracy problems, some refugees may never be relocated.
There's going to be a certain number that you're almost never going to be able to parole, especially the group that came out after the American-sponsored refugees left. That 70,000 people that made their way out on their own, on sampans. Among that group, you'll probably find a few more people that you can't do much with.
So what will you do with these thousands of people?
I think probably you'll have a camp going of some size, hopefully very small, for the lifetimes possibly of those people.
Eisenhower's committee is set up primarily to monitor refugee programs and offer advice and recommendations to President Ford. A federal interagency task force still has the day-to-day job of carrying out those programs. Eldine Brown, a retired State Department official, resigned last night as head of that task force. Brown had said he didn't want to stay in the job any longer than necessary. The unit will now be headed by Julia Taft, a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, who has already set up an independent HEW task force to consider long-range refugee problems that Eisenhower indicates could include permanent refugee camps. Barry Seraph, CBS News, Washington.
The situation on Guam illustrates the problem Eisenhower was talking about. About 35% of the refugee population on that island, an estimated 15,000 Vietnamese, are illiterate. They have been farmers and fishermen, unskilled except in the peasant knowledge basic to sustaining life. Now they're waiting to start a new life in the United States. And the question is, what can they do here? In Saigon, the capital of the country those refugees left behind, life under the communists, on the surface at least, goes on almost as usual. Richard Wagner, who reported from South Vietnam for CBS News, narrates this film shot recently in Saigon.
This film was made by a Japanese news agency with close communist connections and shows the victory celebration in Saigon on the 15th of May as the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong rolled through the surrendered city. News reports said the theme of the celebration was to honor the late Ho Chi Minh, leader of North Vietnam until his death in 1969. Ho's picture was everywhere. The film is meant to show the victorious communist side in the best possible light. At Saigon's Tan Son Nhut Airport, the twisted wreckage of aircraft attests to the accuracy of the communist weapons in the last days of the government of Win Van Thieu. In Saigon itself, the streets are shown full of people. It looks the same as it did when I was there, except communist soldiers are walking among the South Vietnamese citizens. Shops are shown full of food, and the sidewalk food stalls look just as they did for all the years Saigon was full of American troops, not the men of Hanoi. But in the square in front of the National Assembly building, the statue erected in honor of the South Vietnamese Marines lies in ruins, pulled down by communist sympathizers on the 5th of May. Although the smiles on the faces of the people may be suspect, the film does show an almost completely undamaged city in the hands of the communists to do with what they will. The sole reminder of the American presence is this scene of the United States Embassy, abandoned and looted as the Vietnamese adventure came to its end. Richard Wagner, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Also tonight on the CBS Evening News, President Ford's news conference for foreign press. More Americans leave Laos. Socialist versus communist in Portugal. Senator Church on CIA assassination charges. And Eric Severide with a comment on foreign policy and foreign problems.
There are highways you'll never drive over, yet they carry traffic vital to our nation. The traffic, electrical energy. The highway, Reynolds aluminum. Aluminum cable, the most efficient, economical way to carry power. Not all these highways are visible. Some utility companies are laying special Reynolds cable underground to help preserve the beauty of our environment and still meet the demand for energy. Reynolds Aluminum, conserving our resources and energy.
Denture wearers, listen.
For one now, eaters you like, yeah, eaters you like. Take a good, healthy bite of life.
With Super Polygrip Cream Denture Adhesive, you can eat almost anything. Its strong-holding, long-holding plastic formula helps keep even hard-to-hold dentures in place. So problem foods aren't such a problem. Polygrip in plastic and regular formulas.
Take a good, healthy bite of life.
President Ford, characterizing the nation's mood as one of temporary isolationism because of Vietnam, said today that he senses a shift toward a new era of firm U.S. leadership in world affairs. Mr. Ford commented in a group interview with 5 foreign journalists, which subsequently was broadcast by satellite in Europe. Bob Schieffer reports.
As expected, most of the questioning centered on foreign policy, and the president cited his handling of the Mayaguez crisis as proof that the United States has not lost its national will because of events in Indochina.
I'm sure that both domestically in the United States as well as worldwide, the handling of the Mayaguez incident should be a firm assurance that the United States is capable and has the will to act in emergencies, in challenges. I think this is a clear indication that we're not only strong, but we have the will and the capability of moving.
The president said Europeans are doing a much better job at conserving energy than the Americans, and he said he'll decide in the next 48 hours whether to raise a tariff on imported oil in another effort to force Congress to pass a tough energy plan for this country.
The Congress has failed very badly. They have done literally nothing affirmatively to solve our energy problem. Perhaps the imposition of the extra dollar will stimulate the Congress to meet the problem that's important from the point of view of not only ourselves, but the consuming nations. If we had that program in place, the one I recommended to the Congress in January, the threat of an increase in the oil price would be far less.
Did you try and persuade the Shah not to raise the price of oil, as he's quite influential in the group of OPEC nations?
We talked about it. He indicated that there might be an increase. I did point out that it could have very adverse economic impacts.
Mr. Ford dismissed recent suggestions by Defense Secretary Schlesinger and others that the United States might have to consider using military force if the Arabs impose another oil embargo.
If we put the emphasis on cooperation rather than confrontation, then you don't think about the potentiality that was mentioned by the Secretary of Defense. Since we do believe in cooperation, we don't consider military operations as a part of any policy planning that we have in mind.
But it's a contingency not entirely ruled out if things should go wrong.
Well, we put emphasis on cooperation, not confrontation, so we, in effect, rule out the other.
Today's interview sets the stage for Mr. Ford's trip to Europe next week, which will be yet another attempt to reassure Europeans that the United States has no intention of backing away from its commitments to the Western Alliance. Bob Schieffer, CBS News, the White House.
Since the Mayaguez was seized, communist sources have claimed from time to time that the ship was carrying secret materials and equipment for the CIA. The United States and the ship's owners repeatedly have denied that, and the owners have offered to open all the cargo to public inspection. Well, this offer was repeated today when the Mayaguez docked at Hong Kong. Instead, reporters chose at random to open 6 cargo containers. They held auto parts, butane gas, paint, fertilizer, office equipment, and toilet paper.
Hi. You know, my trips into space convinced me of one thing: the value of expert planning. Let's face it, you and I can't be experts in everything. That includes planning our family's financial security. Businessman, doctor, or astronaut, We all need expert guidance. Look, a man builds up a tidy sum. His home, savings, investments, life insurance. But we're not really qualified to handle it. Well, fortunately, there is someone who can help. The well-trained life insurance representative. Especially one who is experienced in related areas, so he can tie in your life insurance with your entire financial plan. Don't try to plan your future alone. If you don't know a qualified insurance man, I recommend that you see a mutual benefit representative. Profit by his experience. I did.
Mutual benefit. You take care of today, we'll take care of tomorrow.
The evacuation of Americans from Laos has begun. 2 chartered jets today took 159 American women and children from Vientiane to Bangkok. About 250 more will follow in the next couple of days. Their departure from the Laotian capital was delayed several hours by governmental red tape and Laotian leftists demonstrating outside the American compound. Ed Bradley reports from Vientiane.
The day started wet and soggy underfoot from the monsoon rains that swept the city, taxing the antiquated drainage system in the old stadium in the heart of Vientiane. But several thousand people turned out to hear speakers declare what was called the will of the people. Phumi Vamvachit, the Pathet Lao Minister of Foreign Affairs, said the Americans had agreed to close the USAID mission, not only in the provinces, but in the capital as well. The strikes and demonstrations that have gathered force in recent weeks continue here in the city. Christian Chapman, the ranking American official here, outlined the USAID position.
U.S. law has 2 fundamental requirements which applies to all aid to all countries for the last 30 years, and that is that we must have a right of observation and audit on how aid is dispensed.
But the Americans were having trouble even leaving their residential compound. For hours, they negotiated with the Laotians who wanted to search all luggage to ensure that no refrigerators, air conditioners, or other valuable appliances were leaving the country. Then they agreed to an American plan that would permit people to leave with only suitcases, which obviously could not contain large appliances. The impasse was finally broken after hours of back-and-forth negotiations. The Americans would be permitted to leave, and the communist Pathet Lao soldiers, the rightist police, and the students would make only a cursory inspection of the luggage, looking at it, but not in it. For some of the Americans, it was a tearful departure at the end of what for them has been a trying time. This first flight is just the beginning of the end of USAID in this country, at least in its traditional form. If the United States is to continue aid to Laos, it will have to be in a different form, and at this point, there is no agreement on continued assistance. Ed Bradley, CBS News at Kilometer 6 outside Vientiane.
And in the Philippines, President Marcos, declaring his country is fighting for sheer physical survival, said today that the Philippine-American Mutual Defense Treaty is a dead letter. Marcos requested the United States return to the Philippines portions of 2 sprawling American military bases, but he said he's not advocating a total U.S. pullout from his country. A military government has been appointed in Lebanon in the latest effort to end the fighting between the right-wing Lebanese and Palestinian guerrillas. But within minutes of that announcement, a shaky ceasefire collapsed and heavy street fighting broke out again in several sections of Beirut. The new government consists of 7 generals and 1 civilian. It's the first dominated by Lebanon's comparatively weak and apolitical military in the country's 32 years of independence. There was one report that martial law might be declared soon. Egypt's semi-official newspaper Al Aram reported today that the Soviet Union has concluded a massive $4 billion arms deal with Libya, including the right to establish Russian air and naval bases there. Well, that would give the Soviets their strongest foothold in the Middle East, in fact, in the entire Mediterranean basin. More on the story from Robert Pierpoint in Washington.
Reliable sources here confirm that the Libyan government has, in fact, signed a major arms deal with the Soviet Union, which has been under negotiation for some time. The figure of $4 billion worth of military equipment is considered approximately correct. There is one point, however, that is disputed. Al-Aram's claim that the Soviets are to be allowed military bases in Libya. Soviet technicians, yes, but as one Libyan told CBS News, we have just gotten rid of British and American military bases in our country. We don't want any more foreign bases. One source explained the huge deal in the following terms. For years, Libya has been trying to buy arms and equipment from the United States. For example, as CBS News reported in January, 8 C-130 transport planes, bought and paid for by the Libyan government, are still sitting on an airfield at a Lockheed plant in Marietta, Georgia. Their delivery held up well over a year now by the State Department. Frustration, an embarrassed Libyan said today, leads to madness. Robert Pierpoint, CBS News, Washington.
The United Nations announced 2 days ago that Syria had agreed to extend the UN peacekeeping force in the Golan Heights for 6 months instead of only 2 months as had been expected. Marvin Kaub, traveling with Secretary of State Kissinger in Turkey, suggests reasons for the Syrian decision.
The basic reasons for Syria's decision are thought to be these. First, that Syria is having severe problems with Iraq, and Syria has had to move some of her troops from the Israeli front to the Iraqi front. Second, that the Palestinians are feuding with one another and with the Lebanese, and they're obviously not yet ready to make up their minds about the Geneva Conference. Their participation in that conference is doubtful in any case. And finally, Syria did not want to go to war with Israel in the next few months because she knew she would be beaten. So the upshot of all of this is more time for Kissinger and diplomacy. Marvin Kalb, CBS News, Ankara.
Portugal appears no closer to resolving the power struggle there between its socialist and communist parties. Today, the country's ruling military leaders invited the two parties to sit down and discuss their differences. But some of the more extreme leftists in the government suggested simply outlawing the socialists. Here's Bob Simon in Lisbon.
This week's crisis in Portugal began with a newspaper dispute. On Monday, communist printers tried to seize control of the Republica, an organ of the Socialist Party. They wanted to silence the paper's outspoken criticisms of the Communist Party. The government responded by shutting the paper down, in effect, siding with the communists. Yesterday afternoon, the Socialists staged a mass rally in Lisbon to protest the shutdown and a lot more. Tens of thousands marched behind Socialist leader Mario Soares. They shouted, "Socialism yes, dictatorship no."
No, no, no.
They shouted, "Republica, Republica," the name of their paper, a name which has come to symbolize the grievances of socialists and other moderates in Portugal today. The socialists won 38% of the vote in last month's elections, far more than any other party. They captured 3 times as many votes as the Communist Party. And yet they say they've got nothing to show for it. The communists control the media, the communists control the trade unions, the communists are increasingly coming to control the military men who started the revolution and who are running the country today. That's what the socialists claim, and they're not going to stand for it. It was an angry crowd, but there were no incidents. The only tense moment came when the marchers passed by one of the communist-controlled newspapers, which was protected by a fair number of soldiers. Demonstrators shouted at the soldiers, "Respect the will of the people." But it's clear that the people of Portugal are proving far too moderate to satisfy the more radical aims of leading military officers. There are ominous signs that some officers want to do away with troublesome political parties and substitute naked military rule, a dictatorship of the left. Bob Simon, CBS News, Lisbon.
Spain announced today that it now is prepared to grant independence to Spanish Sahara in northwest Africa, despite invasion threats by neighboring countries. Spain has favored self-determination for the colony, but had delayed it because of territorial claims by Morocco and Mauritania.
Does your underwear fit right? Even when the world's uptight, Hanes underwear fits right.
Hanes makes you feel good all under. Hanes makes you feel good.
At the waistband in the collar, Hanes won't shrink up like the dollar. Legs and arms have room to fight, and the price is always right.
Hanes makes you feel good all under. Hanes makes you feel good.
Day, Willie.
Oh, I got a today. Heartburn or acid indigestion.
Here, spoon it away. Ah, listen to me. Chew it away.
McGivney, why don't you just wash it away?
What?
Try new Alka-Seltzer Gold. You drink new Alka-Seltzer Gold so it neutralizes excess acid fast and helps wash it away.
Looks like you washed it away.
You washed it away. I told you the boss was right.
Alka-Seltzer Gold washes excess acid away.
Attorney General Edward Levy told Congress today of 5 more counterintelligence programs carried out by the FBI in the 60s. Among them was an Operation Hoodwink, aimed at pitting organized crime against the U.S. Communist Party. This operation involved anonymous mailings, including one letter to an alleged crime figure attacking his business labor practices and made to look like it had been written by communist officials. The Special Senate Committee investigating U.S. intelligence agencies questioned CIA Director William Colby behind closed doors for more than 3 hours today, as Daniel Shore reports.
This was Colby's 3rd day of testimony before the Senate Committee on a single subject, covert operations, including possible involvement in assassination plots. He would not talk to reporters, but his testimony was described by Chairman Frank Church as candid and chilling.
It is simply intolerable that any agency of the government of the United States may engage in murder and any policy that places a black blemish upon this country is one with which the committee will have to deal.
Colby told the committee that in 1973 he issued orders banning the use of assassinations by the CIA, but Church says he wants that written into law just in case some future administration should change its mind. Daniel Shaw, CBS News, Washington.
General Motors, in an attempt to compete with small imported cars, confirmed today it's going to introduce in the 76 model year what it calls the first United States-built mini car. The car, which does not yet have a name or price, is expected to have a 90-inch wheelbase. That's 4.5 inches shorter than the Volkswagen Beetle. New York's First National City Bank, the nation's 2nd largest, today, reflecting continuing recession, lowered its prime lending rate from 7.25% to 7%, and that's the lowest prime rate in more than 2 years. Other banks are expected to follow. The prime rate is that interest rate the banks charge their biggest corporate customers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 13 points on the New York Stock Exchange. Volume was 17,900,000 shares. The average price per share went up 39 cents on the New York Exchange, 10 cents on the American.
For years, many have tried to unlock the secret to fresh perk ground roast flavor. We did it. Taster's Choice 100% freeze-dried coffee. Looks, smells, and tastes like fresh perked. Or for you decaffeinated drinkers, Taster's Choice Decaffeinated. Green label, same fresh perk flavor. Ground roast and Taster's Choice. Just try to taste the difference.
Hey, thought your arthritis is acting up.
It is, but I don't seem so stiff and sore this morning. I took 2 of those for the pain last night.
Bayer timed release aspirin.
It relieves minor arthritic pain and stiffness. You know, aspirin's what doctors recommend. Well, this is Bayer aspirin, but in time release form.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. You only take it once in 8 hours.
You mean it works while you sleep?
Well, it sure helps relieve my morning stiffness.
Bayer timed release aspirin. Strong relief that lasts.
Just outside Davenport, Iowa today, an explosion tore through a Mississippi riverside grain milling complex. 1 man was killed, 7 injured, and 3 persons are missing. The blast destroyed 4 silos and tossed large pieces of concrete as far as 100 yards. Its force shook buildings in Moline, Illinois, across the Mississippi. A National Guard helicopter was used to rescue 1 man from the shattered roof of a grain elevator. Eric Severide comments tonight on the foreign policy considerations involved in President Ford's news interview today and in his forthcoming European trip.
The president reassured some European journalists today that the United States is not about to pull back behind the walls of isolationism, which has been a favorite theme in the foreign press since the Vietnam collapse. In the world of America's alliances, things have reached a bizarre condition. Please don't remove your presence, beg the European allies. Please do remove or reduce your presence, begs Asian ally Thailand and Asian ally the Philippines. Don't weaken the Atlantic Alliance, say the Europeans. But it's worth noting who is weakening what. Ally Britain is sinking into the economic doldrums. Ally Portugal continues in domestic crisis with some risk of civil war. Allies Greece and Turkey are at each other's throat over the Cyprus calamity. Spain, not formally in the alliance, wants recognition of her contributions to Western defense, but various of the European allies refuse because their domestic politics abhors any favorable mention of Franco. The amount of money spent by the European allies for defense, all put together, amounts to less than one-half the American defense budget. Defense Secretary Schlesinger, who has a knack for the blunt instrument without causing fatal wounds, put it like this the other day. There's less of a question of America abandoning Europe than there is of the Europeans abandoning themselves through lack of effort. It was never the thought behind NATO that the defense of Europe become essentially a German-American enterprise, but that's the direction it's drifting in by unspoken permission of the others. And outside of government offices, in the streets, the colleges, the press of many countries, the propaganda war goes on. It has reached an equally illogical and hypocritical stage. The American CIA is denounced every day as if it were a stronger force than the governments of many countries where its people work. It was the Soviets who invented worldwide espionage and subversion. Their agents number far more than any force the CIA has ever fielded, and they are at work in almost all nations. No uproar about them. A worldwide propaganda assault is going on against the so-called multinational corporations. There are serious problems connected with their size and their behavior. But what is interesting is that the assault is almost exclusively against the American multinationals. Great worldwide companies based in Switzerland, for example, or Holland are pretty much left alone. And that's highly suggestive evidence that the assault is political and aimed at this country and its influence abroad. And now there is a hubbub about American corporations paying bribes to do business in certain foreign countries. It is offensive, and new laws may have to be written. What must be added, however, is that paying these bribes is a standard practice for competing businessmen from various countries and standard practice by the business agents of the Soviet Union.
Well, it was an offer just too good to refuse. 1,000 acres of land on the moon for just $4.98. And at least 900 persons replied to the offer, some enclosing money. Only problem is that Arnold Morales of Tucson, Arizona made the offer by advertising in a national magazine, and now a federal grand jury has indicted him, alleging 19 counts of mail fraud. And that's the way it is. Friday, May 23rd, 1975. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
When you spray paint, what you want is a beautiful, smooth finish without runs and drips. That's why I switched to Krylon. Look at this test. Krylon versus the other leading brand. See, the other brand is running, but Krylon's fast dry formula helps you avoid runs and drips. With Krylon, even an amateur can get a professional finish. Beautiful. Krylon for the beautiful professional finish.
Introducing the Mrs. Paul's Fish Fillet Submarine Sandwich. Start with a long roll, lettuce. Lower some delicious quality Mrs. Paul's Fish Fillets into place. Add some tomato. Top it off with Mrs. Paul's special Creator Sauce Mix. And you've constructed a great submarine sandwich. Now, launch that one on your family. Mrs. Paul's Fish Fillets make a sandwich interesting.
This has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. Representative Al Ullman, chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, will be the guest this Sunday on Face the Nation. The Bullets take on the Warriors in the third game of the exciting NBA playoff finals. Tonight at 9, 8 Central, 6 Pacific on CBS.
WLAC-TV, Nashville.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Clark, and in the news tonight, a brief outbreak of fighting mars that rock concert at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. We'll have a film report coming up. Murder charges against a Nashville housewife were dropped today, and meat prices are going to go up. Temperatures seem like they're going up, Ron Kaiser.
Well, they've been going up for the last 2 or 3 days, Chris, and there's not a great deal of relief in sight short of the weekend, so maybe we'll have a pretty good early part of the Memorial Day weekend anyway.
Okay, Mark Aristano is sitting in for Hope Hines on sports.
The Women's Southern ended, and NBA basketball continues tonight.
Okay, details on these and other stories